In 2012, Salvador Alvarenga, a 37-year-old fisherman from El Salvador living and working in Mexico, he had no family obligations as his 13-year-old daughter was residing with her mother in El Salvador, which allowed him to embrace the solitary and perilous aspects of his job. Alvarenga favored a 25-foot fiberglass boat without a cabin or roof, built for cutting through the waves like a surfboard, swift and nimble, with the engine mounted at the back. On November 18, he set out for a fishing excursion in the Pacific with his companion, Ezequiel Córdoba, a 22-year-old newcomer to the trade. Their outing was scheduled from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., a long and grueling fishing trip. They loaded more than 1,000 pounds of gear, including an icebox meant to hold tuna, shark, and mahi-mahi. Despite warnings of an impending storm, Alvarenga remained resolute. The potential profit from a single day's catch could sustain him for an entire week. Once they traveled approximately 75 miles from the shore, Alvarenga cast a 2-mile-long fishing line into the ocean. While the storm was growing stronger on land, its effects had not yet reached them at sea. However, around 1 a.m., conditions shifted dramatically. The boat started to rock violently, causing Córdoba to urge Alvarenga to turn back. As the rising wind and waves flooded their vessel, Alvarenga made a desperate choice. He severed the fishing line, sacrificing equipment and fish worth thousands of dollars to the ocean. At the same time, he steered the boat back towards Chocohuitl, their home port, and informed his boss, Willie, of their critical situation. As dawn approached, Alvarenga spotted the mountain silhouette in the distance. Just as he was planning how to navigate through the treacherous surf near the coast, disaster struck. The engine stalled just 15 miles offshore. In his frantic efforts to get the motor running again, he accidentally broke the starter cord. The men were tossed around the boat by increasingly high waves. Alvarenga called Willie over the radio, pleading for urgent assistance. Willie agreed to help, but the communication was soon cut off when water damaged the radio. The wind kept pushing their boat further into the open ocean, leaving Alvarenga and Córdoba trapped in the escalating turmoil of the Pacific. Their plight intensified with each passing day. After 5 days of battling the storm, the winds finally began to calm. By this time, they had drifted around 280 miles offshore in a desolate stretch of ocean seldom frequented by other fishermen. Their boat sat so low in the water that it would have been nearly invisible to anyone searching from more than half a mile away. Córdoba, feeling hopeless, whispered that they were going to die. Alvarenga, however, was determined not to give in to despair. "Don't think like that," he reassured Córdoba. "A rescue mission will find us." Yet they had no flare gun or means of signaling for help. The days were scorching and the nights were bitterly cold. They sought refuge in the icebox, huddling together for warmth. The relentless hunger and thirst tormented them. 4 days later, their desperate calls for rain were answered. The two men delighted in the rainfall, appreciating the rare chance to bathe in fresh water. Using plastic bottles they found drifting in the sea, they collected 5 gallons of rainwater. If rationed properly, this water could last them a week. About 11 days after their motor had failed, and after subsisting on meager hand-caught triggerfish, Alvarenga encountered an unexpected situation. One night he heard a noticeable thud. A turtle had collided with their boat. Excited, he pulled it on board. This would provide them with nourishment, both its meat for food and its deep red blood for hydration. From that point, Alvarenga dedicated his days to hunting more turtles. Córdoba, however, found the blood unpalatable and consumed the meat sparingly. To encourage his companion to eat, Alvarenga presented the turtle meat as a delicacy. He would cut it into thin strips, add salt water for flavor, and sun-dry it on the outboard motor housing, serving each meal on a turtle shell. While the turtle meat helped stave off starvation, their survival was still tenuous and they began to hallucinate from hunger. In a delirious state, Cordoba longed for oranges. Alvarenga played along, pretending to go to an imaginary store for them, only to return to say the store was closed and would reopen in an hour. Surprisingly, this ruse comforted Cordoba, allowing him to drift into sleep. As the weeks dragged on into months, Alvarenga and Cordoba remained adrift on the merciless sea. A pattern of survival formed. Each morning at 5 a.m., Alvarenga would wake and sit on the deck. Watching the sunrise over the eastern horizon brought him hope of the distant land that once was their home. His mornings typically involved checking their traps for any overnight catches, yet he would wait for Cordoba to wake before dividing their scant rations. Most of the day was spent tucked away in the icebox, succumbing to the need for rest. From being strangers at the start of their fateful journey, the two men formed a strong friendship. Like young adventurers, they would lie on their back at night, gazing the stars, playfully crafting constellations. On what they estimated to be Christmas Eve, their sparse holiday meal was suddenly interrupted when Cordoba doubled over in agony. After eating part of a seabird earlier, they found a venomous snake in the bird's stomach upon closer inspection. While he physically recovered, the psychological impact weighed heavily on Cordoba. The idea of consuming another raw seabird filled him with disgust, and he began to pull away from their communal meals. As days turned into weeks, Cordoba's health deteriorated rapidly. His body was emaciated, with arms and thighs becoming as thin as stick. He decided that dying at sea was preferable to enduring the unbearable pain of hunger. He bid farewell and attempted to throw himself into the shark-infested waters. Alvarenga managed to restrain him, dragging him back onto the boat and forcing him into the icebox. Sitting on the lid, he implored Cordoba to abandon his suicidal thoughts. Once Cordoba calmed down, Alvarenga joined him in the icebox, urging him to fight for survival so they could share their story. But despair had tightly gripped Cordoba. Days later, he declared that he was about to die. Alvarenga attempted to make him drink water, but nothing worked. In this desperation, Alvarenga pleaded, "Don't die, don't leave me alone," but his words were useless. Moments later, Cordoba succumbed. To prevent his friend's body from sliding overboard, Alvarenga propped him up on a bench. The day after Cordoba died, Alvarenga faced his grief head-on. Emerging from the icebox, he gazed at the lifeless form of his friend, propped on the bench as if sunbathing. To cope with his sorrow, Alvarenga began conversing with the body, asking about its sleep and pretending to receive responses from beyond. He reasoned that imagining his companion was still alive was the easiest way to confront the harsh reality of his death. 6 days after Cordoba passed, Alvarenga enacted a final farewell. He slid his friend's body into the ocean. Alone and adrift in the vast Pacific, he returned to the icebox, surrendering his sorrow in a torrent of tears. With Cordoba gone, Alvarenga focused solely on survival. He concentrated on fishing, hoping for rescue, which also provided a distraction from his deep sense of isolation. He even devised a system to detect sharks, enabling him to take brief yet nerve-wracking swims. He would toss bird feet into the water, and if no sharks appeared, he would dive in. These short, refreshing escapades from his floating prison brought him solace, allowing him to dream of being at a beach with friends. Gradually, Alvarenga drew strength from memories of his estranged daughter, Fatima, whom he hadn't seen in years. He envisioned her calling out to him, which filled him with joy. He began to fantasize about life back home, being a family man surrounded by children and animals in a field. He prayed desperately for another chance to restore his relationship with Fatima. One day, a container ship appeared on the horizon, heading directly for Alvarenga. The vessel approached so closely that he feared it would rip his boat in two. Spotting 3 figures at the stern, fishing rods in hand, Alvarenga shouted at them. They waved back. He had been noticed, but to his dismay, none of the crew moved to assist him. They continued to wave casually as the ship drifted away from his sight. Frustration and hopelessness surged through Alvarenga as the ship vanished into the distance. His mental state faltered, reflections slowed, and the gnawing hunger morphed into a lethargic desire to simply close his eye and give in to emptiness. The same apathy that had overtaken Cordoba now threatened to engulf Alvarenga's spirit as well. Alvarenga floated in the ocean for 11 months, covering over 5,000 miles at an average pace of less than a mile per hour. His clothing was in tatters, with only a sweatshirt belonging to Cordoba offering some protection from the sun. Below the waist, he was nearly naked, wearing only ragged underwear and a solitary sneaker picked up from the sea. His head was a tangled mess of copper-colored hair, his face hidden beneath a thick, bushy beard. Throughout this ordeal, Alvarenga wondered if this journey served as a divine lesson, a message he was meant to share. Given his circumstances, it seemed miraculous that he was still alive. He contemplated whether he was spared to provide hope to those contemplating suicide, using his own harrowing tale of solitude at sea as a cautionary example. On January 30th, 2014, Alvarenga spotted coconuts floating nearby amid shorebirds filling the sky, while a cold rain limited his visibility. As he looked out from the deck, he noticed a small tropical island slowly emerging from the rain. It appeared wild and untouched, lacking any roads, vehicles, or buildings. His instinct was to leap overboard and swim to the land, but wary of sharks, he opted to wait. It took him half a day to reach the shore, plunging into the water when he was about 10 yards away and letting a wave carry him in. Left face down on the beach by the receding water, Alvarenga grasped a handful of sand as though it were treasure. He was discovered by the only two inhabitants of Ibon Atoll, the southernmost point of the Marshall Islands and one of the planet's most secluded locations. If he had missed Ibon, his next potential destination would have been the Philippines, a staggering 3,000 miles away. Upon his hospital admission, Alvarenga was diagnosed with anemia, a result of a lack of red blood cells or hemoglobin. Doctors suspected that eating raw turtles and birds during his ordeal might have led to parasites infecting his liver. As a consequence, he struggled to achieve deep sleep, remaining in a constant state of restlessness. While confronting his physical ailments, he was also haunted by the memory of Cordoba's death. After 11 days, Alvarenga's condition improved sufficiently for him to return to El Salvador. When he reunited with his daughter Fatima, he embraced her tightly, expressing love and remorse for the lost years. However, adjusting to life on solid ground proved challenging. For months, he experienced shock, developing an intense fear not just of the ocean, but even of merely seeing water. He slept with the lights on and often sought companionship. It took him a year to fully grasp the enormity of his journey. When clarity returned and he reviewed the maps of his drifts across the Pacific, Alvarenga began to comprehend the extraordinary nature of his 438-day adventure. He had faced extreme hunger, thirst, and isolation that brushed against insanity, yet he had clung to life, exemplifying the resilience and will to survive against overwhelming challenges.